Hello and welcome to the Hypertrophy Odyssey, chapter 388. It is the last day of the week, aka the Big Bang Attack workout. I am feeling very good right now, very excited for this workout. But anyways, to the main subject matter for today. Talking to the idea of a person. So, the main reason why I wanted to discuss this is because this has come up in a previous video, I believe. I forgot exactly which one it is. Hopefully, future Oscar knows, but I highly doubt it. But it was about in one of the statements I said was the idea that when you talk to someone, in theory, you talk to not necessarily that person, but you're talking to the idea of that person. So it's very interesting because I think this dynamic goes beyond just a regular dynamic that would be in a relationship, in the sense that everybody really does it, and it's something that makes things like movies and other shows like that, whenever you hear it happening, you can understand that it's not real, and it happens in multiple facets. It's not just like in entertainment, but also in real life, where we will not necessarily put a facade, but almost put an idea of what we're trying to, like, put the cart before the horse, that type of style. So it's a very interesting dynamic that happens, and I wanted to look into it specifically because I think I do this a lot. I'm personally, I would say, guilty of this, even though it's not necessarily bad, but it's more so along the lines of a phenomena more that I think happens more often than not with people. And because of this, it causes a lot of friction and social tension amongst people, or at least overthinking in a lot of senses. So there's a lot to go into this, because I think this is something that people do all the time. And I think that it's not necessarily bad, but more so maybe something that we need to get out of, and I've tried at least a decent amount and how I've gotten out of it. But we'll talk more about that and all the stuff that comes in between when we get to Mother Base. All right, so start off with single arm lat pull down, which is pretty good. But anyway, back to the main subject matter for today. Talking to the idea of a person. So the main reason why I wanted to discuss this is because you kind of see this in entertainment a lot, where you'll have two different characters talking in a movie or TV show or something along those lines, but it doesn't really feel like they're actually having a real life conversation, more so just talking at each other. And you can see this a lot, specifically in movies that are like comedy movies. You'll have things that just don't seem like coherent conversations because they're doing basic improv the entire time. Sometimes it's funny, of course, but the thing is, it just doesn't make for a realistic scenario, or that's not really how people interact, and then it kind of detaches you from the experience if you ever really notice it. The reason why I wanted to just talk about it more is because I think that a lot of people end up doing this more and more as, I guess, social skills have generally gone down the toilet, and talking to people is less and less of a face-to-face interaction and more a screen-to-screen interaction. So having an actual face-to-face conversation can be weird for certain people, where they will not really know how to interact with each other, more so because they are taught to only, talk via text, or even worse, via email language, which is surprisingly very feminine for some reason, but that's a whole other story for a whole other day. When it comes to a real life interaction with someone, I think a lot of the time when you do something like this, you end up just kind of making the idea of the person in your head and then try to talk to them in that sense. And then when you do that, it's more of a way to try to get ahead of what they're going to say, so that way you can predict accurately what they're going to do. Proactive in the conversation rather than reactive. But in reality, when you are talking to most people, just being reactive to things in the earnest, at least, is probably going to get you a better opportunity to actually speak to them, and also a better understanding of who they are, because a lot of the time you'll just try to make something up in order to one up them or try to get ahead of them. And I think that that is a very big error, and it happens a lot, where you just try to make these own scenarios in your head of how they're going to react to what you're thinking of or what you're saying, without actually listening to them. And at the end of the day, that's really what it is. It's just the difference between hearing them and listening to them. And it's such a stupid and normal thing that people don't actually do. A lot of the time they will just take the word words that are being said without taking any of the other contexts around them. I think this is one of the biggest issues that most dudes have when talking to women, because a lot of women will imply things with their language, their body language, and other types of tonality, because that's how they work. But a lot of dudes will just hear what they're saying rather than actually paying attention to what the way they're saying it, because that's what matters more to them. And that's the general gist of certain things like that, where you're talking to the idea of them, how we work, in the sense that we are very logical minded. What you say is what you mean, but that's not how they work. So that's how it kind of gets lost in translation. So even in this scenario where I'm talking about this, I am talking to how I see as my idea of the woman in theory. But even then, I know how to separate that. And that's the thing. I think separating it to make sure that you are actually talking to the person, actually listen to them out, make sure that you're actually having a good time. I recently went out with my friend. The entire time we had a good time. It was gut busting, laughing hilariousness, because we just kept going back and forth, just, listening to each other, staying off our phones, just really paying attention to what we were talking about, And I think that generally speaking nowadays, I think that this idea of talking to the idea of the person really causes the friction amongst people and causes what is essentially the fights and things like that, when there are misinterpretations or where people are just bogged down and stupid and do not understand that an argument doesn't have to be an argument, but are willingly misrepresenting what the other person is saying in order to try to make their point, when in reality they aren't even listening to the person, but more so just what they want to put out there as the person. So that's how people become, quote, villains in the eyes of other people, when they have said nothing that is villain-like. In fact, they are probably more of the villain because they aren't actually paying attention to whatever the person is saying. You'll get this a lot with politically left-leaning people will generally do something like this. The best current day example of this that you see on the internet a lot is the entire "I love pancakes. Oh, so you hate waffles?" entire debate, which is the basic idea of this. We're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing exercises. Not filmed one, actually. Didn't film the rice bucket. Just completely forgot to turn on the camera, which is super annoying. Exercises skipped, none. Just super annoying. That was very annoying. But anyways, talking to the idea of someone. So the main reason why I wanted to discuss this is because this is something that it can be good and it can be bad. It's not a end all be all, and actually, depending on how things are going, it can make things a lot easier, but it also can make things a lot harder, especially in a relationship or in any type of relationship, really, whether it be with somebody that you care for a lot or don't really care for, or is a coworker or a friend or anything like that. It's a very interesting dynamic because it involves obviously listening to the person, but also once you know a person, if you know them well enough and actually know them, knowing someone isn't as common as you would think, in essence, that I would know what everything that you would do in the next move or six, that entire idea, but that's kind of a different story for a different day. The idea is that if you truly know the person, and this is a rare thing, but if you truly know them, you will know how they'll react and what they'll do and what they'll say about certain things. And you can, in theory, talk to the idea of this person, where you can cut out through all of the walls and or attributes or whatever else that you know that may or may not be popping up, and directly talk to them. So you're not even talking to them, but more their spirit or the idea of them, because you already know them. But this is a very rare thing, and also people will create their own ideal of what that person is like. Thus, when they try to cut through it, it ends up falling short, or worse, they misinterpret the person, and then thus they cause arguments, friction, just general terribleness in the relationship, because then the person usually who does this gets stuck with their interpretation of the person, and the other person is trying to get their reality to the person who is interpreting them, and thus they kind of clash, and sometimes the people can't unlock the two ideals, so it becomes a weird mesh of a person that becomes an idea, and thus they and thus the person is kind of screwed. It makes it so the relationship is forever skewed in one way or another, because most of the time people who will like intermesh like that, that's why you'll see arguments and stuff like that, because they will want to argue with the idea of what they're going to do, or influenced by one specific time or person or thing, rather than cutting through and trying to get to the actual person. They have created a person who is across from them, and it's very sad when this happens, because this happens a lot with certain people, of course, but it does happen a lot where people would like to think that they don't do it, but they end up doing it way more than they should, and thus that way people can't really discuss with them anything, or if they do, they're not really listening, and listening is half the battle, if you haven't already guessed from this. That's 99% of it, honestly, but at least a good 50% of it, not necessarily 99%, but still it's a good chunk of it. And I think a lot of people underestimate the listening part, because you have to listening, and then the other big part is understanding and trying to calculate the roadmap that is the person, the personality. But depending also on the person, that can be as simple as, they got like 2 points and that's it. But that's kind of a different story for a different day, because I would like to start a series about the soul and all that other stuff, but that's for a different episode. I think this one is just more something that I see, and you can see it happening a lot most of the time when people try to present themselves, especially online. You get the idea of what they want to be or what they want to show. So it's a very interesting phenomena. And if you find yourself where you're talking to a partner or a friend or whomever that you might be in your life, reassess and make sure that you're actually talking to them and not the idea that you have of them, because a lot of the time people get complacent with their roadmap of who the person is, and thus they become the idea and not really a person, and that can lead to stagnation in relationships, or even quarrels and things like that. So just be or disagreements or whatever, it can lead to a lot of friction, and you just got to be careful about that type of stuff. But with that being said, tell me what you think in the comments section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. This was much more of a analysis of one specific saying or thing, because I'm very always curious about these types of things. But please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. If you have any stories of anybody or anything where this might have happened, where you see somebody and they've said this, or they had some argumentation that kind of goes along the same lines, or anything like that, please let me know in the comment section down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. I will be back on tomorrow with a new video. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I will see you in the next one. Keep it heavy. Stay safe out there, and stay warm. It's fucking cold now. Stay warm out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.